Hello, everyone. Today we will step into a room where the air feels heavy, too heavy for a celebration. Crystal glasses sparkle under warm golden light, but they feel cold, almost sharp. Somewhere nearby, cutlery clinks against porcelain, steady, precise, like a clock counting down to something I can't yet see. I'm seated at a long table, white linens stretched smooth. Perfect, untouched. It's supposed to be a night for joy, a night to look at someone you love and think, you've made it. My grandson sits at the head of the table, navy suit, bright eyes, a smile that's real, and for a moment, I almost forget the tension. Almost. Because she's here, my daughter-in-law. Her smile is polished, her eyes sharp, waiting. We've had disagreements before, small ones, the kind you can pretend to forget. But lately, it's different, colder, calculated. Still, I'm here for my grandson, because tonight should be his night. The dinner flows in waves, laughter at one end, whispers at the other. My son sits between us, like a wall, or a warning. I tell myself there will be no trouble, not tonight, but trouble doesn't ask permission. It arrives, fast, in the middle of the toast. Her voice slices through the air, clear, cold, loud enough for half the room to hear. And I know, this is no accident. This is the first move. My hand tightens on the base of my glass. Not from anger, from certainty, from the deep, steady knowing that this night will not end the way it should. I glance at her. She's already looking at me, smiling, and I realize she's not here to celebrate. She's here to win. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And tell me, where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? I read every comment, because trust me, you'll want to hear every part of this the night before it happened. Everything felt almost normal. Almost. I remember the quiet, the way the house settled into itself, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the soft ticking of the clock in the hallway. It was the kind of evening where you tell yourself, maybe I imagined it. Maybe the tension isn't real. But tension, it doesn't disappear. It hides. It waits for the right moment. That afternoon, I had been in the garden, pulling weeds, letting the sun warm my shoulders, trying to focus on small things, the smell of fresh earth, the sound of a bird hopping across the fence, the feel of dirt under my nails. Little things keep you steady. They keep your mind from wandering into dangerous places. I'd thought about calling my son, just to talk, just to hear his voice, but I didn't, because lately, our conversations felt different. He was cautious, measured, like every word might be weighed against her opinion. I didn't want to give her another reason to twist things, so I stayed silent. That night, I laid out my dress for the graduation dinner. Simple, navy blue, something I'd worn before and felt comfortable in. I didn't think much about it. Why would I? But looking back, I realized she would use even that against me. When I closed my eyes, I told myself, tomorrow will be about him, not her, not me. I didn't know that the moment she walked into that restaurant, she was already planning every word, every glance, every pause, and I didn't know that she had been waiting for weeks, patient, precise, ready to strike when the audience was perfect. Because cruelty is patient, and tomorrow, it would finally show its face. She waited until the room was warm, until the wine had been poured, until the laughter at the far end of the table softened into a comfortable hum. That's when she moved. It wasn't sudden, not at first. She leaned back in her chair, fingers curling around the stem of her glass, her lips curling into that polite, empty smile she wore like armor. Then, her eyes locked on mine. And I knew. I'd seen that look before. It was the look of someone who'd already decided they were going to hurt you. They were just deciding how much. She spoke my name slowly, like a teacher about to scold a child. And then, the words came, sharp, precise, designed to land where they would bruise the deepest. The room went still, Forks paused midair. My grandson's smile faltered. I felt it. That small twist inside my chest, not from shock, but from confirmation. She had been waiting for this. Her tone was sweet on the surface, but every syllable was dipped in something bitter. It was the kind of cruelty that hides behind manners, the kind people can laugh off if they're not the target. I didn't look away, not once. If you look away, you give them ground. And with people like her, every inch you give becomes a mile they take. So I sat there, still, calm, my hand resting on the tablecloth, my breath steady. She kept talking, her voice weaving between fake concern and open insult. And I realized, she wanted me to react. She wanted me to snap, because if I snapped, I would become exactly what she'd been telling everyone I was. Vindictive. So I smiled. A small smile. Barely there. And for a moment, it threw her off. But only for a moment. Because people like her, they don't stop. Not when they think they can win. And in that dining room, with half the family watching, she was sure she would. The proof didn't come to me by accident. It arrived because I went looking. And once you start looking, you have to be ready for what you'll find. It began with a name, one I'd overheard in a conversation she didn't know I was close enough to hear. A name she spoke like a burden, like something she wanted erased. At first, I didn't think much of it, but the way she said it, low, flat, almost resentful, it stayed with me. So I wrote it down, just in case. Weeks later, that name came back, in a folded letter slipped under my door. No return address, no explanation. Just a single sheet of paper, with a phone number and 3 words. You should know. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't want to call, but because I already knew. Whatever waited on the other end was going to change everything. When I finally dialed, a man answered. His voice was tired, measured, like he'd been through too many conversations like this before. He called himself Raymond, said he was a private investigator, and then he told me the story. The name I'd written down was not a stranger. It was family, blood. A daughter she had cut from her life completely. Not drifted from, not lost touch with. Cut. Deliberately. Signed papers. Walked away. Erased her like she'd never existed. I listened without speaking, without moving, without even breathing too loud. Because every sentence, every detail, felt like a door slamming shut on the image she had built for herself. And in that moment, I understood something. If she could erase her own child, she could erase anyone, even me. That's when I decided. I wasn't going to confront her yet. I wasn't going to warn my son. Not until I had more than a story. I wanted proof. Paper. Video. Something no one could twist, because she was good at twisting. Better than anyone I'd ever met. So I told Raymond to keep digging. I didn't care how long it took. I didn't care what it cost. I needed the truth. All of it. And when I finally had it, I would decide exactly how to use it. A trap isn't built in one move. It's built in pieces. Quiet. Careful. Invisible. Until it's too late. I started with the smallest details. The times she glanced at her phone during family dinners. The people she avoided greeting at the grocery store. The way her voice sharpened whenever certain topics came up. Each one, I filed away. Raymond sent me more, scanned documents, email printouts, dates and signatures that told a story without needing a single adjective. Her story was unraveling, but she didn't know it yet. I kept my tone warm whenever we crossed paths. I let her believe I had given up on our unspoken war, because the easiest way to make someone careless is to make them think they've already won. At night, I would sit at my kitchen table, papers spread out in front of me, a mug of tea cooling beside my hand, reading the same lines over and over until I knew every word by heart. Not because I needed to remember them, but because I needed to feel them, to let them burn into me so deep that no amount of gaslighting could make me doubt them later. I began planning the reveal. It couldn't be rushed. It had to happen in a place she couldn't run from, in front of people whose opinions she couldn't afford to lose, It would need an audience, and not just any audience. The right one, family, close friends, the people she'd worked so hard to charm. I thought about birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. None of them felt right. And then, the invitation arrived, my grandson's graduation dinner. Perfect. The date was set. The guest list was full. And she would be there, confident, glowing in the spotlight she adored. She would think the night belonged to her. And that's when I would take it back. Not with shouting, not with rage, but with proof. Because sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is simply put the truth where everyone can see it. The dining room was warm, too warm. Candles flickered on every table. Shadows danced across white tablecloths. Glasses caught the light and threw it back in sharp flashes. Laughter rolled through the room in soft waves. Waiters moved like clockwork, silent, smooth, efficient. I sat 2 seats away from her, close enough to hear every breath, far enough to watch her without being obvious. She was in her element, charming the couple across from her, leaning in toward my son, her hand resting on his arm, laughing just a little too loudly at his jokes. My grandson was glowing, sharp suit, straight posture, that youthful certainty that the future is his. And for him, I kept my smile steady, but inside, my heartbeat was a drum. Slow, heavy, counting down. I waited until the plates were cleared, until dessert was set down in front of us, until the room had settled into that post-meal hum. Then, I nodded, a small signal to Marcus, the waiter. He didn't hesitate. The lights dimmed, the chatter quieted, and the large screen on the far wall came to life. Her smile froze, just for a second, but I saw it. The first image was nothing dramatic. A legal document, dates, signatures. Murmurs began. Confused glances moved from the screen to her. Then the audio started. Her voice, clear, cold, words she could never take back. Permanent termination of parental rights. No contact allowed. I want a clean slate. The room went still. Even the waiters had stopped moving. She shifted in her chair, tried to speak, but the recording kept going, every sentence stripping away another layer of the image she'd built. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the screen. Because this wasn't about me. This was about truth. When the video ended, the silence was heavier than the air had been all night. My son stared at her. Confusion, hurt, something darker. She opened her mouth, but no one leaned in to listen. The trap had closed, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't seem sure what to do next. It didn't take her long, 48 hours, that's all. By then, the whispers had already started. Not about her, about me. She didn't come to me directly. She went to my youngest daughter first, 3 states away, far enough to keep her safe from the tension in this house. Safe. Until the phone rang. My daughter's voice was tight, uneasy. "Mom, what's going on?" I could hear it in her tone. She'd already heard her side, and her side always came dressed in silk. "She said you had her followed," my daughter continued. A pause. Then softer. "Did you?" The truth was simple. Yes. But the reason, that's what mattered. She didn't care about the reason. She'd already planted the seed. Already told my daughter that I was obsessed, cruel, vindictive, and just like that, the ground shifted under my feet. It wasn't just my daughter. Neighbors began to look at me differently. Conversations in the grocery store were shorter, more polite. Polite in the way people are when they don't trust you anymore. One afternoon, my oldest friend Dorothy came by. She hesitated before sitting down. Her eyes slid away from mine. "I heard the girl, Madison, was troubled," she said slowly, as in, acting out. Maybe even drugs. I stared at her, not because I believed it, but because I knew exactly where she'd heard it. "She was young, scared," Dorothy continued, repeating the lie like it was truth. "She thought the girl would be better off with someone else. And there it was. Her narrative, already polished, already spreading. She wasn't defending herself anymore. She was attacking, rewriting history until my own children, my own friends, didn't know what to believe. That's the thing about people like her. They don't just fight back, they make you question yourself. And if they're good enough, they make everyone else question you too. By the end of the week, I realized I hadn't been in a fight for the truth. I'd been pulled into a war for my reputation, and she was winning. It started in his voice. Not anger, not shouting, just distance. The kind you can't measure in inches, only in how it feels. He called one evening. His tone was careful. Too careful. "Mom, we need to talk." 4 words. And I knew. We agreed to meet at a cafe halfway between our houses. Neutral ground, as he put it. The kind of place where strangers might overhear. And maybe that was the point. When he arrived, he didn't hug me right away. He smiled, yes. But it was the polite smile you give a coworker, not your mother. We sat, coffee between us, steam rising and curling into the air. "I think," he began slowly, "you've misunderstood Esme." The way he said her name, soft, protective, it told me more than his words ever could. "She told me," he continued, "that the situation with Madison was complicated. Complicated. A word that hides more than it reveals. She said you took her words out of context, that you wanted to make her look bad." I felt the heat rise in my chest, not from shame, from knowing she had gotten to him. "David," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I have the documents. The recordings. You saw them." He leaned forward, and for the first time, his tone had an edge. "You violated her privacy. You went digging. That's not how family treats each other." The words hit like a slap, not because they were loud, but because they weren't. He sipped his coffee, looked anywhere but at me. In that moment, I understood. This wasn't about proof anymore. It wasn't about truth. It was about loyalty. And his loyalty was with her. When he stood to leave, his parting words were soft, but they cut clean. "Mom, please, just let this go." I watched him walk away, back straight, hands in his pockets, and I realized he wasn't just leaving the cafe, he was walking out of my corner. It started small. A pause in the grocery store aisle, a smile that didn't quite reach the eyes, a conversation that stopped the moment I walked past. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Coincidence. Bad timing. But coincidences don't happen every day. Not like this. At the bakery, Mrs. Jensen rang up my order without asking how I was. She'd asked me that same question every Friday for 15 years. That morning, nothing. Just a polite nod and the receipt. At the post office, the clerk handed me my package without looking at me. Usually, we'd talk about the weather, about his dog. Not anymore. Even Dorothy, my oldest friend, stopped dropping by without calling first. When she did come over, she kept glancing at her phone, checking the time, like she couldn't stay too long. And every time I saw her, she'd say something that didn't sound like her at all. She must have had her reasons. It's not black and white, you know? "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Not her words. Her voice, yes, but not her words. It was like watching a slow leak you couldn't plug. My life, my relationships, draining away. I knew where it came from. I knew who was feeding them. But knowing didn't make it stop. Because lies, they travel faster than truth. They're easier to believe when they come wrapped in charm and pity. Some nights, I'd sit in my kitchen, the house too quiet, the phone too still, and I'd think, this is what she wants, not just to discredit me, to isolate me, to make me small, alone. Because when you're alone, you're easier to erase. It happened on a gray afternoon, the kind of sky that presses low over the rooftops, the kind that makes the air feel heavy in your lungs. I was at home, tea cooling on the counter, a half-finished crossword spread open in front of me. The knock at the door was soft, almost uncertain. When I opened it, she was standing there, a worn backpack slung over one shoulder, hair pulled back, clothes neat but simple. Her eyes, that's what stopped me. They were familiar, warm brown, the same shade as my grandson's. "Madison," she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake, but there was something in it. A weight, like she'd carried the sound of her own name alone for too long. I stepped aside without thinking. She walked in slowly, glancing around like she wasn't sure if she belonged here. We sat at the kitchen table. The tea between us had gone cold. She told me she knew about the investigation, that in a city as small as Portland, word always gets around. And then, she told me what she'd lived through. 15 years old when her mother disappeared, 17 when she aged out of foster care, 20 when she hired someone to find her, only to be told her mother had died in a car accident. The investigator had even shown her a death certificate. A lie. A piece of paper her mother had paid for. Cheaper than child support, she said, her mouth curving into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. I sat there, the edges of her words cutting deeper than I expected. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just told it. Like a story she'd had to repeat to herself so many times, it had worn smooth. When she finished, she looked at me. Really looked. I'm not here for money or revenge. I just want him to know I exist. She didn't need to explain who him was. And in that moment, I knew. Bringing her into the light would change everything. Not just for her. For me. For my son. For my grandson. The question wasn't whether I could. It was whether I should. The day of the gathering felt different. The air in the house was too still. Like it knew. I'd told no one except Madison. Not my son. Not my grandson. No one else knew she was coming. We arrived together. She wore a simple blue dress. Respectable. Uncomplicated. The kind of outfit you choose when you want to be taken seriously, but can't afford mistakes. Her hands smoothed the fabric over and over in the car. A nervous habit. She didn't speak. Neither did I. When we stepped up to the front door, I knocked. I had a key, but I didn't use it. It wasn't my house anymore, not really. The door opened. My son stood there. His smile was automatic. Until his eyes shifted to Madison. Conversations inside began to slow. First to a murmur, then to silence. One by one, faces turned toward us. Curiosity, confusion, recognition in some, but not from knowing her, from knowing what she meant. Esme appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand. Her expression froze. Color drained from her face. "That's not possible," she said. Her voice was high, thin. Madison stepped forward, her voice steady. "I was 15 when you signed the papers, 17 when I left foster care, 20 when I was told you were dead." Each sentence landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading through the room. Esme tried to speak, to rewrite the scene even as it unfolded, but Madison didn't give her space. She told them everything, not with drama, not with anger, just truth, the kind that doesn't need to raise its voice to be undeniable. My grandson stood beside her before she even finished. No hesitation. And in that moment, the room shifted. It didn't belong to Esme anymore. It never would again. It happened fast. 1 second, she was still clinging to the performance, the careful tilt of her head, the pleading tone, the lines she'd rehearsed for years. Then, something in her snapped. Her voice lost the syrup. Her face dropped the smile. And there she was. The real her. "I had a new life," she said, her words sharp, clipped. "I couldn't have my past following me around, ruining it." Gasps moved through the room. Not because the words were loud, but because they were naked. No excuses, no sugar. "So you erased me," Madison said quietly. Esme's jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do." My son flinched. Not from surprise, from hearing the truth without disguise. "You erased your own daughter," my grandson said. "No question, just fact." Esme turned on him, on all of us. "I wasn't going to let a mistake ruin everything I'd built. I have a family now, a real one." The silence after that felt heavy enough to crush the walls. Because in that single sentence, she told them all. We were never family to her. We were tools. Properties. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for someone to back her, to nod, to give her a lifeline. No one moved, even those who'd defended her weeks ago. They wouldn't meet her gaze now, and in that frozen moment, her mask was gone for good. It was my son who spoke first. Not to me, not to her, to the room. "I'll have my lawyer contact you." The words landed like a hammer, not loud, not rushed, just final. Esme blinked. Once, twice, like she hadn't understood. "Divorce?" she said. More disbelief than fear. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. My grandson stepped closer to Madison. A small, silent gesture. But it said everything. Esme's eyes darted between them. Between the man she'd thought she controlled and the son she'd thought she owned. "You can't do this," she hissed, her voice dropping low, sharp. "Everything you have is mine to decide what to keep," he cut in. The shift in him was subtle, but it was there. His shoulders straightened, his voice steadied, and for the first time in years, he wasn't speaking through her shadow. Esme's gaze turned cold, colder than I'd ever seen. "This isn't over," she said. Her eyes slid to me. "You'll regret this." I didn't flinch. I'd been waiting for her to say those words, because people like her, they never just leave, they linger. They look for ways back in. But for the first time, she was the one standing on the outside. The legal process began within days. Papers filed. Accounts frozen. Her access narrowed with every week that passed. It wasn't clean. It wasn't quick. And it came at a cost. My son's trust in me wasn't restored overnight. Too much damage had been done. Too many lies had settled in his mind before the truth took root. But in the eyes of the court, and in the eyes of this family, her power was breaking, piece by piece. The house felt different. Not louder, not quieter. Just emptier in a way that couldn't be measured by furniture or walls. Her things were gone. No perfume lingering in the hallway. No sharp heels clicking against the kitchen tile. No shadow waiting at the edge of every conversation. At first, the absence felt like relief. Breathing without the weight on your chest. Moving without watching for the tripwire. But relief has edges. It doesn't erase what was broken. My son came by more often. Not every day, not like before, but enough that I could feel the distance softening. We didn't talk about her much, and when we did, it was careful, like touching a bruise you're not sure is healed. Madison settled into her new life slowly. New school, part-time job. The cautious way she accepted kindness, like she wasn't sure if it would last. My grandson stayed close to her, protective in a way that made me proud and a little sad, because no one should have to learn loyalty like that so young. Some nights, I'd sit at the kitchen table, tea in hand, and think about the years we'd lost, the ones she'd stolen, the ones we'd never get back. Yes, we were together now. Yes, the truth had been spoken. But truth doesn't mend everything. It can bring people back into the same room, but it can't give you the years you should have had together. We were rebuilding, slowly, carefully, piece by fragile piece, and maybe that was enough. Maybe. The days grew softer after that. Not easier, just softer. The sharp edges of her presence had faded. The house breathed again. Light moved freely through the rooms, falling in warm pools across the floor. I learned to fill the quiet, with the kettle's gentle whistle, with the slow rhythm of chopping vegetables for Sunday dinner, with the low hum of a radio playing in the background. Madison came by often, sometimes with my grandson, sometimes alone. She'd sit at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, telling me about classes or the customers she'd met at her part-time job. There was a calm in her voice now, not complete, but growing. My son joined us now and then. Always welcome, always cautious, like a man still learning which doors were safe to open. We never became what we had been before. Too much had happened, too much had been said. But we became something else. Not perfect, not whole, but real. I still thought about her sometimes, not with longing, not even with anger, just with the quiet acknowledgement that some people leave scars you learn to live around. The war was over, not because one side had truly won, but because there was nothing left to fight for. And that, in its own way, was an ending. A quiet one, not a fair one. But sometimes that's all you get. So if you're still here, listening until the last word, thank you. Thank you for reading the whole story. Hope you will support my next products.